Okay, my name is Brenda DeShields. My date of birth is August 24th of 70, and I was born at the old Washington Original in Fayetteville, Arkansas. Okay, my parents are Freddie Rush of Fayetteville, Arkansas, and Nancy Wilburn Rush of Farmington, Arkansas. We lived in a house in Springdale after I was born. We came home to a new home in Springdale. My parents, my dad unfortunately, not too long after I was born, became disabled. And so I grew up with a disabled father in the home, and my mom had to work very hard to make a living and help us get the things that we needed as children, because no parent wants their children to go without. And so she worked very diligently at factories and just worked really hard to make ends meet, because a disabled paycheck doesn't bring in too much.
So how did that impact your work ethic, do you think?
It impacted mine by seeing my mom have to work really hard. My mom, in those times, more money was assembly line type work, so she worked at different factories, and she didn't ever miss. I mean, she couldn't really afford to, because she had to help with the medical bills with my dad and help with us kids at school with our activities, and she made sure we were still in sports and did things. So she had to work really hard, and I think that impacted me a lot, because to get anything out of life, I was taught you have to work for it.
So did you have siblings?
I do. I have a brother. My brother is Johnny Rush, and he actually lives in Lincoln, Arkansas, with his wife, and they had one daughter. We, as most siblings, were almost 4 years apart. I'm very headstrong. He's very headstrong. So we had some fun times. We have some fun stories to tell our children. It's a miracle that we lived through most of those. We were raised in the country, and country kids are like no other.
So what are some of the things you would have done as a country kid, maybe that the city kids wouldn't have done?
Well, for one, our swimming pool were cattle troughs. The bigger the better, and all the farm kids would come over and we would jump into the cattle troughs. They probably wouldn't have even heard of that. That'd be gross. But that's what we use for swimming pools. We have all kinds of fun stories. We spent our summers in the hay fields. It's how I learned how to drive. I was the girl. Even though I was raised in the country with all boys, I was the only girl. And my dad was very adamant that I wasn't going to do the hay, so I would be the driver. So that was quite interesting, teaching me how to drive some of those old hay trucks and the granny gear. I learned granny gear really well. So, played football with the boys, rode horses, we had a small, what I would call old McDonald farm. We had chickens and rabbits, and taught us a lot of responsibility of taking care of animals. Well, I was out of high school. I was taking some time off before going to college, and I had to have a job. I'd just recently been married. We got married right out of high school, and I had a friend that knew his mom was looking for some employees. We had played in band together in high school, and his mom happened to be Sue Hodges. And he was like, I'm sure my mom wouldn't mind giving you an interview. That's all I can get you is the interview. I can't promise anything after that. I came and interviewed, and I've been here for 34 years. So the day that I came in for the interview, and pretty much when I started, I walked in, and it was something, honestly, I felt like I was walking into like an Army surplus area. It had the old green Army desks and a lot of Army surplus furniture. It was heavy, bulky furniture. The carpet, I can remember, I'm sure it was in style at some point. It was old orange shag carpet with that green Army surplus. It was really beautiful, let me tell you. It was not. But and Sue had, in her defense, had been elected, that was in 88, and she had just got elected in 86 or 87. I can't remember when her election was, but so she hadn't been here very long herself. and shortly the carpet went away. I mean, obviously it was outdated and had seen its better days, but yes, it was very, very historical looking when I came to work here. We had typewriters. Everything was done by typing. I had more advanced typewriters from just graduating high school than what I had when I came into the office to work here. So it was, we didn't have, obviously computers were not a thing then. So when any kind of documents came in, you had file markers that were, we just started doing electrical file markers that we could put papers in them and it could stamp them. Before that it was hand file markers. We typed all the warrants by hand. We typed all the subpoenas and summons. You didn't get to type them on a computer and then print them out. Each one was an original. You were typing them. If you had to make copies, we had a copy machine, but those could not be the official documents. They all had to be originally typed. So when the prosecutor walked in with a list of 50 people to subpoena, you were typing 50 subpoenas. When I was hired as the criminal deputy clerk. There was one criminal deputy clerk. There was one clerk that helped with civil and family court. And there was one clerk that, one clerk did civil court, one clerk did chancery court. Because back then you had chancellors. So you had chancery court and you had circuit court. So there were 3 of us that did the court. That changed over the years to now. When I was hired to do, you're hired as a circuit clerk and recorder, not just court. So we had 9 of us, and that was counting the clerk. Today we have 38 of us. So with growth of population and just documents, and some of the requirements require more documents, but the growth, it has just changed. So from walking in to being 9 of us to 38 now, it's definitely changed.
What about the way in which you support the judges? Has that changed?
Yes. When I started, we were more interactive with the judges, and the judges were more interactive with us. Judge Oliver Adams was our chancellor, and he would come down on his lunchtime, and he would eat animal crackers, so animal cookies. And he would come down almost every day and just sit and talk with us at the counter. And we loved that, getting to hear stories about court. And Judge Tom Keith would do the same thing. He was a circuit / chancellor judge. And he would come in, sit down and just talk. And, he was more of a storyteller and get us riled up talking. But now the judges are just so busy and they have their own staff, and with electronics we don't interact like we did before. We would take files to court before and they would bring files in, but with electronics and computers everything's submitted electronically, so we don't interact as much as we did. So the circuit clerk's office, I always used to say, in comparison to things, was the hub. It was the central hub of the whole court system. The attorneys met there, clients met in the clerk's office. It was a very buzzing place. There were times there wasn't even enough room in the office. People would have to be waiting to come into the office. Unfortunately, that is part of the sad part of electronics. The human aspect of it kind of goes away, the interaction. We're still the hub, it's just different. Everything's coming through a hub electronically, and we see the documents, we don't see the people. So that's been where we were on the forefront before with the attorneys and talking with them and the clients, and now we're kind of the background. So we went from being the forefront to now we're not seen, but we do all the work in the background. Pro se people that are representing themselves still come in, and we interact with those. Individuals needing copies from their files, we still service the public on that for court stuff. So we still interact with the public, just not the actual attorneys as much as we did before. The recorder's office, it used to be title companies were always in. They had runners coming. It was a very happening, buzzing place there also. And again, same thing. Electronics has slowed that down to where now we don't see faces. We know names, but we don't know the name and the face that goes together. In 2003 is when I took office. In 2003 to 2004, we doubled just in that 1 year of our records. So our real estate records completely doubled what we had done in 2002 to 2003. Might not have ran if I'd have known that we were going to double so quickly every year. I'm just kidding, but it would have scared me a little bit, I think, to know we were going to do that much in 1 year. And over the years, it's kind of been the same thing. I mean, we just keep, the growth is bringing in more records. And, you know, as custodian of record, that's what my job and that's what my deputies do, is keep the official records and maintain them. And so that's really changed over the years. The larger the volume, you know, requires you to have to do a little bit different things to keep records and keep them secure. And I can't really think of too much that's changed other than just growth. I mean, and bringing in employees. And I will tell you that bringing in all the employees has changed my job. As the chief deputy for Sue, you know, I still kind of maintained the employees, but I think when she retired, we had maybe 19 employees. And that was still pretty manageable, and you could get around to all the employees and their work. And now, as 38 employees, you do start having to do a little bit more of HR type. Even though we have an HR department, I'm still the elected official of my staff, so you start doing more business. So I don't get to work out at the counters. I don't get to work on the dockets for the judges or record land records. I'm mainly working on personnel and financials. Because one thing with growth in courts, people don't realize, is all the financials that come into this office, and the responsibility of that. So it's really changed my job as the clerk. Judge Norwood was the judge when I first started working here. He was a very kind man. Of course, I was just a deputy clerk, but from what I can remember, he treated all the other elected officials. They were a team. If they went to any kind of events, he always offered to drive, and they would all go get in his vehicle and all ride together. I remember Sue talking about how much fun that was, of them all going to events together and getting out, and just the stories that they would get to talk about, you know, on their road trips. And then Bruce Rutherford came in as a county judge, and Bruce, everybody loved Bruce. He made some people mad, but you couldn't stay mad at him very long. He was just a lovable kind of guy. And the administration building behind the courthouse, the Benton County courthouse, he was very instrumental. Matter of fact, he is the reason that building got built, because he realized we were out of space and we needed to do something. And he really pushed to have that built, and it's been used and at full occupancy since he's opened the doors. Then he came back and worked for several years as the prosecutor's private detective. So he's just, he's always been around county government. He was a big part of Benton County. Always will be remembered as a big part of Benton County.
Interesting.
And then we've had several county judges. Since then, we've had Judge Anderson. We've had Judge Cummings. I think both of those served 1 term, maybe 2 terms. They were not here very long. And then we had Judge Kleinard that stayed. I think he ran a couple terms. He's Judge Black. I forgot about Judge Black. Judge Black is a very lovable guy. I still talk to him today. Matter of fact, I talked to him last week. Very much loved his county. Him and Travis Harp was his assistant. Travis Harp was an interim county judge for a brief time, and then when Judge Black ran, Travis became his assistant, and they were quite the duo. They were always together, but they were a lot of fun. Treated the county employees very well. Cared about, he'll tell you today, I love my county. So, and then Judge Bisbee, I believe, spent some time in the House of Representatives, and he also spent some time on the Senate side. And when he got term limited out, came and ran for county judge, and he served a term or 2 as the Benton County judge. And then we have the current day county judge. So we've had several county judges over the years since I've been here. Barry Mooring is the current county judge, and he has come in from day one trying to help solve a space issue. He's had his hands full from day one. of do we build a new courthouse? And then voters voted that down. We now need a new jail. So he's had some challenges along his way, but he's done a great job. Probably, I will say Judge Tom Keith and I had kind of a special little bond. He'd always tell me, if Sue doesn't run, are you going to run for office? And I'm like, that's a farthest thing from my mind. I love working here. I love being her assistant. She's not going to retire, so we're not going to talk about this. Well, the day she came to me and said, Brenda, I'm not going to run again, but I think you should consider it. He was one of the ones I went and talked to my pastor, but Judge was like, you can do it. He's like, you can do it. You've been the assistant for 14 years, and I've got faith in you. You can do it. Some of the other judges were same thing. You can do it. We want you to run for it. So, I did. But his bond, he always called me Debbie. My name's Brenda. So go figure. He said I look like a Debbie more than a Brenda, so he always called me Debbie. It was kind of an ongoing joke, and every once in a while we'd be in front of a group of people and he'd forget to really call me Brenda, and he'd call me Debbie, and they'd look at me and I'm like, just go with it. It's a long story. He would tell people, we would be in the middle of a jury trial, and he'd tell people that I practically started working here when he was changing my diapers, and I'm like, no, you didn't. But he felt like he kind of raised me in the courthouse, and I would go ask him questions. I was hired as the criminal clerk. He did criminal court. And so I would always go ask him questions. Why are things done this way? Explain this to me. And he would sit down and he would explain the process and why the law says that things could work that way. And we just became really good friends. There was an attorney I thought of. He's long been deceased, but his name was Pal Woods. And I used to get so tickled at him. He would come in, and most of the time he was all flustered. But he had his clients, and I always thought this was the oddest thing. Part of their pay, he would always take people that were indigent. But part of what they could come up with was they had to go by and pick him up at his office and bring him to the county courthouse. He never drove a car here, ever. His clients always brought him and always took him home. And I always thought that is so funny. I mean, first of all, to get in a car with your clients, what if it didn't go so well at the courthouse? You have to ride back with them. So I always thought it was funny. There's been some fun times over the years of getting to work in the clerk's office and meeting the attorneys and becoming friends with them. Benton County and Washington County so intertwined with attorneys. If we had high profile criminal cases, a lot of times it was W.H. Taylor and John Everett would come up, and especially John Everett, they would go in and just hear him talk. He knew how to work people. I mean, he just knew how to tell stories, and you just couldn't help but follow along with him. And I'm assuming it was the truth, but you wouldn't know if it wasn't, because he was that great at telling a story, and you would buy in on it because he was just good at it. A very good attorney. W.H. Taylor, same thing, high profile cases. With us being so close, a lot of people would hire him on criminal cases. Those two really are the two that stand out, because that's the two that would really come up and cover high profile cases. David S. Klinger, he was a prosecutor for 30 plus years. Very respected as a prosecutor, later became a circuit judge, treated the clerk's office phenomenally. I mean, he was great to the clerks. I remember one time going over to his office, and judges and clerks have a love-hate relationship. I don't know if you're aware of that, but you got to have big shoulders to work in the clerk's office, because anything that's going to go wrong, if we can get blamed, we're going to get blamed. So you just learn to roll with it. And we know it's not personal, so they're in the heat of the moment, they're in some serious moments, and you just go with it. Nothing personal. I remember one time going over to Judge Klinger. He had summons me over to his office, and he was like telling me all these things that I was already the clerk, so he was telling me all these things that my office was doing incorrect. And I said, okay. And he was like, he was so mad, and he was in the heat of the moment, and he maybe used a few colorful words to me. And I was like, well, what do you want me to do about it? I said, I'm going to go back and correct it. Because he's like, are you just going to stand there? What do you have to say for all these mistakes? And I said, okay, you brought them to my attention, so I'm going to go back and I'm going to go to the office and we're going to correct them. And I said, but for the record, I didn't make all the mistakes. My staff made these mistakes. And so we were kind of going back and forth, and he's like, just get that, out of my office and go correct them. And he was laughing at that point because, like I said, we have a love-hate relationship, and they all have grown up with me here. I mean, I've been here longer than any of the circuit judges. So they all have that, probably give me a little grace of things I probably shouldn't say to them, and then they think it's funny that I actually said it. Like, just get out of my office. Go take care of what I called you over here for. And then we're laughing, but that's just part of it. He became a judge. Let's see, what other prosecutors? There's been several prosecutors that have left and either went to the U.S. Attorney's Office or to Walmart. Van Stone's a very good prosecutor. He treated the clerk's office really well. We became pretty good friends while he was in the prosecutor's office. He would always call me up and ask me questions. One of my deputies put in an application for him. He'd say, so tell me about this deputy before I hire them. and are you and I going to be good if I hire them? So he was always just a very good friend. You asked what was different when I first started, and I talked about the growth in the clerk's office and the deputies that it takes now to even do the records for court. I could say the same for the prosecutor's office, because when I started, there was the prosecutor and 2 main prosecutors. And now he's got, I don't even know how many prosecutors and staff he has, because it's grown tremendously, but Ben Lipscomb and Bruce Rhodes were the 2 main prosecutors. And when I started, it's really kind of funny, because I started right out of high school, and they wouldn't let me wait on them. Because they didn't want me typing their stuff. They didn't know if I was young. Everybody else in the clerk's office was in their 30s to 50s, and here I'm 18. And they wouldn't let me wait on them. And one day, I don't know if you're familiar with Bruce or Ben Lipscomb, but one day he came up here and I walked up to the counter and he asked for another person to wait on him. And I said, no, you got me and I'm waiting on you. And he was, here I'm 18. And he was like, but I don't want you waiting on me. I said, and you're going to have to tell me why. Because I'm the criminal deputy clerk, and I am going to do your warrants and file your informations, your indictments, so you're going to have to tell me why. And he was like, well, I just don't know that you've been here long enough, and I just don't know if you know what you're doing. And I said, well, I tell you what, I'm going to file your stuff. Nobody else in here is going to get up. And I was like pointing at all of them here. I'm 18. And they're not going to get up, and I'm going to do your documents. And to this day, if he sees me, he walks up and gives me a hug. But we laugh about it because he would not let me wait on him. And I'm like, okay, either I'm just going to have to get really brave here, because a lot of the attorneys at first wouldn't let me wait on them because I was so young, I guess. I don't know. But, they didn't think I knew what I was doing. One attorney, I can't think of his name right now. He was a lollipop guy. He would come and stand behind me, and he would watch me type. And I told him one day, I said, you're so worried I'm going to make mistakes. Do you not think that that's going to make me a little bit more nervous? You're pointing over my shoulder at everything I'm doing wrong or right. And as I was telling my chief deputy earlier, the growth has been good to our county, but it comes with growing pains. And those growing pains is we lose a little bit of the personal touch. Along with technology and growth being a combination, it does change things. It doesn't make it wrong. It just makes it different. Benton County is just beautiful. The trees, the foliage, but the best part of it's the people. We have all different cultures, what I call walks of life, but at the end of the day, it's still just the good old hometown people. It's the people. My favorite thing about Benton County is the people. They're just very down to earth. You don't have a lot of natives anymore, but when you do, it's just, there's nothing like a community coming together.